And good evening. This is a special edition of Top Story, live tonight from New Orleans, the city reeling from the deadly New Year's terror attack. Tonight, more than 36 hours after a U.S. Army veteran plowed his truck into a crowd celebrating on Bourbon Street. We're learning more about that attacker, the explosives he planted, the victims, and the survivors. You can see it right behind me. The iconic Bourbon Street in the heart of the New Orleans French Quarter has reopened this afternoon. The crowds are starting to fill up the streets right now. The music is playing. The bars are back open. And there are also new security measures in place. There are cops on every block. As far as the eye can see, there are new barriers in place as well. We're going to show you those a little later in the broadcast. The mayor insisting that the city and the iconic Bourbon Street are safe tonight for residents and for visitors alike. We're also just a mile away from the legendary Superdome, where tens of thousands of football fans watched the Sugar Bowl after it was postponed in the wake of yesterday's tragedy. And here is what we know at this hour. At least 14 people were killed and dozens of people were injured. The FBI announcing that Shamsuddin Jabbar, who proclaimed his support for ISIS, acted alone. An explosive device was discovered inside the truck he rented, and two others were planted in coolers on the street. New images just released by the FBI, take a look at these, show the attacker around 2 a.m. as he placed one of the coolers containing an IED, pipe bombs filled with nails. Investigators seeking information from anyone who may have seen him in this disguise or carrying those coolers to please contact the FBI. The horrifying scene unfolding around 3:15 yesterday morning after the attacker veered around a police car. You see it here, sped his pickup truck along the sidewalk. This new video showing just how fast he was driving, narrowly missing this crowd of people. And that pickup truck eventually crashing into the crane you see here. But look a little closer at this image. You can see a wheelchair that's been sort of tipped over, a black wheelchair. In just a moment, you're going to hear from the man who was thrown from that chair, breaking both of his legs and landing flat on his face. I spoke with him from his hospital bed. He says he cannot believe he is alive and still very much in a state of shock. Tonight, we're also learning more about the victims, a single mother raising her young son, an aspiring nurse, an engineering student, a former football star, and a devoted father of two among those killed. Friends and family reconciling with the unimaginable as they remember their loved ones. And the FBI still searching for answers as to why this man, who was born in the U.S., who's a former member of the Army, would commit such a horrific act. What drove him to pledge his allegiance to ISIS? Right now, we're learning more about the financial trouble he was in, dealing with mounting debt. Also tonight, new details about the deadly Tesla Cybertruck explosion outside of a Trump hotel in Las Vegas. Police revealing today that Matthew Allen Leifsberger rented that car and shot himself inside of it just seconds before it blew up. This 37-year-old who lived in Colorado Springs was a highly decorated soldier and was on approved leave at the time. And take a look at what was found inside that car. 2 handguns, fireworks, mortars, and aerial shells along with 2 of his IDs. Police saying they used Tesla charging stations to track him down. His movements and security camera video showing him pulling into the Trump Hotel valet an hour before the blast. Though the FBI in New Orleans said there is no connection between the 2 incidents, police in Las Vegas did note the similarities.
They both served in Afghanistan in 2009. We don't have any evidence that they were in the same province in Afghanistan, the same location, or the same unit.
Also of note, both men rented cars used in the incidents from the app Turo. As we mentioned, they both served in the Army and both used explosives. A lot of questions still remain unanswered, but tonight New Orleans is coming to grips with this atrocity, one step at a time.
Tonight, this new video showing the high-speed terror attack in the early hours of New Year's Day.
We got a white horn. I need EMS at Canal and Bourbon now.
People celebrating on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, scrambling to dodge that white pickup truck the FBI says was driven by 42-year-old Texas-born Shamsuddin Jabbar. He died after crashing into a crane and getting into a shootout with police. This photo showing the truck and a black wheelchair belonging to Jeremy Senke, who was knocked to the ground.
Cops were looking at me, and I know at this time that they were looking at me because I was still alive, and they weren't worried. They knew I was still alive, so I'm screaming, and finally somebody came over to me and just looked at me and said, "Listen, we know you're hurt, but you're alive." That's what they said to me, "You're alive."
But his legs were broken, and tonight he's still in shock over the killings.
I'm not against anybody like that. I love everybody. I love everybody, and I just can't believe that would happen.
14 people killed in the attack, dozens more injured and hospitalized. University Medical Center, New Orleans, treating the most critically wounded.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Not to this extent. You know, we're a level 1 trauma center. We see lots of significantly injured patients routinely. But this is probably the largest number of influx of patients at one time. We had a mix of both blunt and penetrating trauma. We had patients that were injured from the vehicle going down the street, as well as some with gunshot injuries.
Authorities now searching Jabbar's Houston home, as well as a residence where he stayed in New Orleans, locating 3 cell phones and 2 laptops. And tonight, piecing together more information about the man who had an ISIS flag on the truck he used in the attack. We now know he was an Army veteran who at one point deployed to Afghanistan, worked as a realtor, property manager, and beginning in 2021, an employee at financial consulting firm Deloitte. But also, more recently, someone who posted videos expressing his desire to kill and his inspiration from ISIS. 5 videos the FBI says posted to Facebook in the moments before his deadly rampage.
In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers.
In this YouTube video posted 4 years ago, Jabbar is seen promoting himself as a trustworthy real estate agent because of his time in the military.
I spent 10 years as a human resources specialist and IT specialist, where I learned the meaning of great service.
But he appeared to be struggling financially, going through a divorce several years ago. According to public records obtained by NBC News, he lost $28,000 with his business in 2021, owed $16,000 in credit card debt, and wrote to a divorce lawyer in 2022 saying, "I cannot afford the house payment. It is past due in excess of $27,000 and in danger of foreclosure if we delay settling the divorce." According to family members who spoke to the New York Times, Jabbar was raised Christian but converted to Islam and recently had been barred by his ex-wife from spending time with their 2 daughters after acting erratically. The FBI says Jabbar claimed to have joined ISIS before the summer of 2024.
This was an act of terrorism. It was premeditated and an evil act.
The FBI, which initially said it did not believe Jabbar was solely responsible for the Bourbon Street attack, now says he appears to have acted alone, renting the pickup truck on December 30th and driving from Texas to New Orleans on the 31st.
We do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack is involved in this attack except for Shamsuddin Jabbar.
According to the FBI, Jabbar also placed 2 explosive devices in coolers near the scene of the attack. One at the cross-section of Bourbon and Orleans Street, the other at an intersection 2 blocks away. 2 senior law enforcement officials say both devices contained nails inside of them and had receivers for remote detonation.
We did obtain surveillance footage showing Jabbar placing the devices where they were found.
And authorities are investigating a fire at the New Orleans house where Jabbar is believed to have stayed, saying it started after Jabbar was killed. Its cause unclear.
She was a loving, caring person. She loved her son.
Jessica Carvajal now among those in mourning. Her sister, Nicole Perez, killed in the attack. She leaves behind a 5-year-old boy named Melvin.
She don't really go out. And she decided to go out tonight to celebrate. And now she's not coming back.
Do you remember the last thing you guys said to each other by any chance?
She texted me at 12 o'clock at night telling me, "Happy New Year, sis. I love you so much." And I told her I love you too. And I didn't know that was going to be her last text message.
In New Orleans today, Bourbon Street reopened ahead of the Sugar Bowl. The college football game delayed a day because of the attack.
We have brought in heavy trucks.
The police superintendent assuring people her city and their iconic street are safe.
And one of the biggest college football games of the year being played tonight right here in New Orleans, the Sugar Bowl, a day after that deadly attack on Bourbon Street. The Superdome, you see it here, secured by a massive law enforcement presence. But questions are mounting about the city's safety as it prepares to host the Super Bowl here next month. NBC's Jesse Kirsch is at the Superdome tonight.
After a nearly 24-hour delay, this afternoon the game went on. The Sugar Bowl between Georgia and Notre Dame kicking off at the Superdome. But first came a moment of silence for the 14 people killed by an alleged ISIS-inspired terrorist, only about a mile from the stadium. Ahead of the high-profile game, the Superdome fortified with barriers, law enforcement, and canine units.
We have reinforced the area.
Just like any other game day, you've got all these fans making their way toward the stadium. But how many college football games have you been to with this just blocks away?
Lisa Mitchell and Trisha Campbell are from Georgia.
I have anxiety walking to the game, not being in the stadium, I don't think, but walking.
New Orleans locals, Pat and Chris Williams, have faith in their city leaders.
Was there a moment at all when you guys thought, I'm not going to this game?
No. I was a little concerned, but I trusted that they were going to make everything safe and secure.
Others, like lifelong Bulldogs fan Darryl Huckabee, chose not to stay. He's already back home in Georgia.
Our plane was full of Notre Dame and Georgia fans that were very sad to have to be leaving the city without watching the football game.
His hotel was right on Bourbon Street.
I could see 7 bodies still laying in the street right outside my window.
And with that, Jesse Kirsch joins us live tonight outside the Superdome. So, Jesse, you were inside during the game. What was the crowd like, and did you obviously know an increased police presence at all?
Yeah, Tom, I got to tell you, as you walked through the stadium and you saw it in our piece just there, clearly a visible, high-profile security presence. You go through security. It was like any other security check before a game. From what I could tell, it took me just seconds to go through the MAG, metal detector check. And then once we were inside, it was like any other pregame. Then they had the moment of silence. Only probably around 60% of the stadium was full at that point, and this was the better part of half an hour before kickoff when that moment of silence happened. But if someone was just dropped right in their seat, I think they would have no idea mid-game that anything was different. It felt like any other high-profile, big-time college football bowl game. But there were clear signs. Take a look at this. I shot this video myself on the concourse during the game. These are FBI SWAT team members in camouflage uniform. There were also Department of Homeland Security police there as well. Federal law enforcement clearly visible on the concourse. That is something I have not seen at a major sporting event, certainly on that level. And the city is definitely trying to send a message there, Tom, because as you mentioned, they are set to host the Super Bowl here next month. And this was something that clearly had no margin for error. Of course, in the aftermath of an attack, you never want a margin for error at an event like this, but they are expecting to be hosting a global event next month, Tom.
All right, Jesse Kirsch for us outside the Superdome tonight reporting. Jesse, we appreciate you being there live for us tonight. The FBI working with law enforcement across the country to learn more about who this attacker was, how he was connected to ISIS, and why he chose to target New Orleans. There are a lot of unknowns tonight, but what we do know is that this man rented a car in Texas, and then he drove here to New Orleans to attack this city and the people here on New Year's Eve. NBC's Kathy Park is in Houston tonight for us. So, Kathy, talk to us about the FBI and their investigation in Texas.
Tom, good evening. So right now, the FBI is not saying whether they were able to retrieve any sort of evidence from this area where we are standing, which is the 12,000 block of Crescent Peak Drive. They only confirmed that there were no arrests. They searched the area for hours, and the area has been cleared, and there is no longer a threat to the community. I can tell you, Tom, that this is a far different scene right now than what we saw this time last night. This entire neighborhood was barricaded. There was a large law enforcement presence. But I can tell you, Tom, that I spoke with a neighbor earlier today, and he was telling me that he had an interaction with Jabbar on New Year's Eve. I asked him what words were exchanged. He said that he was moving to Louisiana. He was apparently packing up his white pickup truck that a lot of us has already seen so far, and he told the neighbor, who asked not to be identified due to security reasons, that he was heading to New Orleans to begin a new job in IT, Tom.
Okay, Kathy Park live for us in Texas. Kathy, we thank you for that. We're also following the latest on that other New Year's Day attack, the explosion of a Tesla Cybertruck outside the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. Authorities today revealing the man they believe was behind the wheel and new details about what they found inside the charred vehicle. Morgan Chesky has the latest from Vegas tonight.
Tonight, authorities identifying the suspected driver of the bomb-laden Tesla Cybertruck that exploded outside the Trump International Hotel, saying evidence points to Master Sergeant Matthew Livelsberger, who was behind the wheel. Now investigators piecing together the 37-year-old's ID and final few days.
First and foremost is a military identification. We also found a passport.
Authorities say the body was burned beyond recognition, but the coroner found a gunshot wound to the head prior to the explosion.
There are 2 tattoos that has given us a lot of confidence that this is, in fact, the same person.
Inside the truck, investigators found fuel canisters and firework mortars, plus 2 semi-automatic handguns they say Livelsberger bought legally on Monday. Sergeant Matthew Livelsberger was on active duty, served as a Green Beret assigned to Army Special Operations Command. He was based in Germany but on approved leave, according to Army officials. He was deployed multiple times and was a recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor. His motive tonight still unknown.
I'm comfortable calling it a suicide with the bombing that occurred immediately thereafter. I'm not giving it any other labels.
Livelsberger rented the Cybertruck in Denver on December 28th. Using data from Tesla charging stations, officials tracked his route through Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. On New Year's Day, he was first spotted in Las Vegas at 7:29. 5 minutes later, he's seen driving through the valet area at the Trump Hotel. He drives around for a while, and then at 8:40, he's back at the Trump valet. 17 seconds later, the Cybertruck explodes.
It's pretty scary.
In Colorado, stunned neighbors reporting seeing the active duty soldier with a partner and young child.
They just had a baby, and we'd say hi to each other, and she was a really friendly person.
The FBI spending the last 24 hours searching at least one home in Colorado Springs. What are they keying in on?
So they'll look for clues for his motivation and his ideology. Are there pamphlets? And then additionally, is there any kind of manifesto that explains why he got to this point?
All right, Morgan Chesky joins us live from Las Vegas tonight. Morgan, I want to put that path back up for our viewers here. You took us through us in your story. Authorities laid this out. The driver taking that Tesla, right, from Colorado, you can see it right here, through New Mexico, Arizona, and finally to Las Vegas. Did the police give you any indication of why he chose Vegas or if he had any connection to that city?
Yeah, Tom, that's one of the biggest questions left out there. We do know that the FBI conducted a search today and late last night in Colorado Springs, where we believe this 37-year-old lived. Hopefully, in some of that evidence gathered, it could shine a light on why he chose this as the final destination here, but no clear answer to that tonight, Tom.
And then, of course, there is the issue of Trump Tower, the president-elect Donald Trump, Elon Musk, a close advisor to the president-elect, the Tesla Cybertruck. Do we think this was politically motivated in any way?
That has been presented as a question to both investigators and experts. As they said, experts, Tom, have told me that this appears at face value to be more politically motivated than anything else. But unfortunately, because the driver died in that crash, it may be something we don't get a clear answer to. And that's why they're hoping that something such as a pamphlet or a manifesto may shed new light. But again, nobody is ignoring the fact here, Tom, that this was, as you mentioned, a Tesla Cybertruck parked in front of the International Trump Tower here in Las Vegas, with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, the president-elect, being as close as they are here. Tom.
Okay. Morgan Chesky for us reporting from Las Vegas tonight, part of our team coverage covering all of these attacks. As officials continue to investigate the Cybertruck explosion and the New Orleans attack, there have been questions about whether these incidents were at all connected. Today, the FBI said no, but some of the similarities are hard to ignore. For more on this, I want to bring in NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian. So, Ken, listen, the FBI was about as clear as they could be, right? They're saying they have found no links between these two attacks. But it does seem so strange that both these attacks would happen around the same time in such a dramatic fashion, and here in New Orleans with the death of 14 innocent people.
Yeah, there are definitely some striking parallels between these two incidents, Tom. Look, both involved electric vehicles rented on Turo, which functions like an Airbnb for vehicles. Both attackers served in the Army, both stationed at Fort Liberty. Both appeared to serve in Afghanistan around the same time. But when you unpack this a little bit, these links may be less persuasive than they first seem. First of all, millions of people use Turo. The Las Vegas attacker was a Green Beret, while the New Orleans ISIS sympathizer was an IT specialist who never served in combat. They obviously were not in the same unit. It's not clear they were at Fort Liberty at the same time, and police said they were not in the same province in Afghanistan. And so far, there's no hint of an ISIS connection with the Las Vegas attacker. But perhaps the most important thing to consider is that the FBI has been poring over all their devices, their social media accounts, their digital footprints, and has found no communication or links between these two men. Tom.
Ken, what do we know about the explosives used in both locations? Any similarities there?
That's actually another important difference. Authorities say the bombs made by the New Orleans attacker were fairly sophisticated pipe bombs full of nails that could have killed a lot of people. The Las Vegas attacker, they say, used a very crude explosive made of fireworks, which investigators said was surprising given his military expertise, Tom.
Okay, Ken Delaney for us tonight. Ken, we appreciate all of your reporting tonight on this important coverage as we try to report out both what happened in Las Vegas and what happened here in New Orleans. For more on the attack on Bourbon Street, I'm joined tonight by City Council member Oliver Thomas. Oliver, thank you so much for joining Top Story and our special coverage here. I'm going to come over here to give you some room. As you look over your shoulder here, Oliver, to Bourbon Street, I guess the first question is it safe tonight?
Yeah, I think we've done a great job at putting together all of our law enforcement people with our state, city, and federal officials to do the best job to make sure that we're safe. Now, what is safe today in the world? What is safe in America? What is safe anywhere today? But we're doing the best we can. We have people everywhere posted up, and I think we're taking every precaution necessary.
You know, we have cameras all over Bourbon Street tonight. Our crews have been covering all of New Orleans. It's reopened. The FBI gave Bourbon Street back to the city of New Orleans. It doesn't look full. There's obviously some trepidation, which can be expected. I mean, 14 people died here, you know, less than 48 hours ago. Do you think the crowds will gather here later tonight?
I mean, absolutely. We're New Orleans. I mean, anybody who underestimates New Orleans and its recovery, they don't understand what we went through with malaria, the floods of 27, Hurricane Betsy, Hurricane Katrina, neglect from the federal government, and we came back even after COVID, right? So we're one of the most resilient, most necessary places in the world. New Orleans will come back. Look at us. We have people out here on the street.
When you came in, I don't know if you entered through the entrance of Bourbon Street. I did. That hydraulic platform is now up, right? That steel plate that won't let vehicles
absolutely.
in. There's barriers on the sidewalks.
Yes.
Are you frustrated that the security wasn't in place on New Year's Eve?
I'm frustrated that people lost their lives and that two of our officers were injured in returning fire and saving the lives potentially of hundreds and thousands. Well, that's what I'm frustrated about. Hopefully, and I know we will learn from this as we move forward. Every city in America right now is trying to figure out how do they protect themselves. As a matter of fact, they talk about the bollards and barriers. Let's take a look right here. Even if you had bollards and a barrier in the middle, if a car put two of its wheels on the side street right here, there's no fire hydrant, there's no pole, there's no light stanchion to block it. So let's not highlight and pick on people about what wasn't done. Let's make sure we do what's necessary to be done to protect all of our cities and all our people in the future.
No, I get it, and I understand. And I understand the points about, you know, you can't secure everything. But for the terrorist to be able to go as fast as he did from Iberville all the way to Conti, it was because there were no barriers.
Man, for the terrorists to be in America, period. For Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whoever it is, to have Americans afraid of our own community, that needs to be stopped. Our federal government needs to operate at the highest level of internationally to stamp out these people. They shouldn't control our way of life. Think about it. We're spending millions and billions of dollars for people to fly. We're going to spend millions of dollars to block streets and sidewalks. That money could be going to our seniors, early childhood education, and affordable housing. So even if nobody gets hurt, they win when we redirect billions to something that we shouldn't have to.
The Sugar Bowl is being played tonight here in New Orleans. Was it too soon, or do you think waiting a day was enough?
I think waiting a day was perfect. What I heard in the briefings that I attended was that everybody was taking every precaution to talk about how you harden some access points, how do we funnel people to the dome, and how do we maximize all these resources to make people safe. We see that happening right now, but I just want the world to know New Orleans doesn't have to come back because we're already here, and we'll continue to be here.
What kind of guarantees can you give to the people of this country and football fans about the Super Bowl, which is about a month away?
Well, I don't make guarantees, but what I will say is we'll do everything within our power to protect the people who visit here and to protect the people who live here.
14 people died out here. I don't know if any of them were your constituents. What do you tell those families tonight?
I tell those families that we grieve, we mourn. I spent 3.5 hours. I was the first elected official at the emergency center at University Hospital with the officers and people who were coming in. We stayed there talking to them, talking to their families. We not only feel for them, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this terror doesn't happen to anybody else. We love y'all, and we'll continue to pray for you.
Oliver Thomas, I went to school here. I married a girl from New Orleans, so I know how special the city is, and I know New Orleans will bounce back, and we hope you guys figure everything else out.
New Orleans ain't going nowhere. They've already tried.
Okay. Oliver Thomas from the City Council, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our live coverage from New Orleans continues after this horrific New Year's attack. Tonight, investigators revealing new details into the terrorist past. How did a military veteran become an ISIS supporter? What we're learning tonight. A live look at the Superdome, the city of New Orleans, in mourning and under heightened security. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage of the horrific New Year's Day attack here in New Orleans. We want to show you some live pictures of some of the precautions being put into place right now on Bourbon Street after this terror attack. Those are some of the steel and metal barricades they've put up on the sidewalk to make sure cars cannot get up on the curb like that terrorist did just less than 2 days ago. You can see some of the police cars here, the barricades, and then the military as well, the National Guard, Louisiana's National Guard, on call, protecting the streets of New Orleans tonight. And as we mentioned, the military, the service of the man behind the wheel of the Cybertruck that exploded yesterday in Las Vegas, and the terrorists as well that killed 14 people here in the great city of New Orleans, both served our country in the military. I want to bring in NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Cubie. Courtney, I know you've been digging in with your sources at the military. We've been hearing from officials that they don't believe these attacks were connected, but there are a number of similarities, especially in their records of military service. Walk us through what we know about each of them.
Yeah, that's right. Both serving in the Army. And I think just the proximity of these two incidents is what really has people scratching their heads. But the reality is, well, there are similarities. There are a lot of differences as well. So we'll start with Jabbar, this man that you've been talking about throughout the whole show already, the man who was behind this horrific attack in New Orleans. Now, he served in the U.S. Army on active duty, entering in 2006 and serving until 2015. During that time, he did deploy to Afghanistan in 2009. After the end of his active duty time, though, he went in the Army Reserves before he discharged in 2020 under honorable conditions. Tom, during that time, he attained the rank of Staff Sergeant. That's a senior non-commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. And so far, everything in his record seems pretty normal. There's nothing that really indicates that he had any big, serious disciplinary problems throughout his time that was related to his service. Now, I mentioned that he deployed. One of the biggest differences between these two men and their service was their jobs in the Army. Jabbar served as basically an administrative clerk, serving in human resources. He did some time in IT and cyber, but he really was more on the admin side during his time. Then we transition to Matthew Livelsberger. He is the man who is believed to have been killed in that explosion of the Cybertruck in Las Vegas. Very different time in service, although they did join around the same time, 2006. He actually was, throughout his time in the military, in the Army, he was in the Special Forces, becoming a Green Beret initially. He did a number of different deployments, including several to Afghanistan. But I should say, Tom, these two men did not overlap. In fact, they served years apart during their deployments to Afghanistan. He served in the Guard and the Reserve for a couple years, but then went back on active duty in 2012 and was actually still on active duty at the time of this explosion that is believed to have killed him. But Tom, the thing that really stands out to me was he was a master sergeant in U.S. Army Special Operations Command. That's a senior enlisted non-commissioned officer. That is a difficult rank to attain, especially in the special operations world. He served nearly 20 years. This man served, according to his service record, he received a Bronze Star, including one with Valor. He served in combat. Everything in his releasable service record indicates that he served honorably and achieved a relatively senior rank in the non-commissioned officer corps, Tom.
Courtney, I want to play you something that one of the ATF officials said this afternoon at the news conference about the bombing in Las Vegas. Let's take a listen.
I just want to be careful with my language here, but the level of sophistication is not what we would expect from an individual with this type of military experience.
Courtney, how noteworthy is that, and what do you make of it?
It's extremely noteworthy, Tom. So I suspect why that official said that is because of exactly the level of experience that he had in the U.S. Army. Again, specifically in the Special Forces units. He would have had access, most likely, to knowing how to make explosives. He would have had, during these combat deployments, he would have had experience around these sorts of explosives. So the fact that this truck seemed to be packed with very crude things like fireworks is surprising. Now, that being said, even if he didn't have any kind of a formal training on it or real experience around explosives, because of his time in the military, presumably he would have known how to figure out, he would have known where to go to get more information about sort of more specific explosives that you would think someone with his level of military experience would be using. It is a real head scratcher what was in that truck, Tom.
Yeah. Still a lot of questions. Courtney Kube, though, we thank you for all your new reporting, along with our team at NBC News that has been digging into this. We appreciate all of you. Both of these deadly attacks committed by U.S. citizens raising concerns over the rise in homegrown terrorism. For more on this, I want to bring in Chris O'Leary. He's a former senior executive in the counterterrorism division of the FBI and is currently the senior vice president of the SOFAN Group. Chris, we thank you for joining Top Story tonight. My first question to you, we had two of these deadly incidents in one day. Are you concerned we'll continue to see more attacks like this? Is there anything that leads us to believe that America should be sort of very vigilant right now?
Well, good to join you, number one, and simple answer is yes, but for different reasons. So for the attack in New Orleans, for those of us who've worked counterterrorism for the last couple of decades and those of us who continue to look at it closely, the threat from ISIS and al-Qaeda, global jihadist organizations, is persistent. We were told after September 11th this will be a generational fight, but yet a lot of our attention has pivoted away from the ongoing threat. ISIS is as strong now as it was 10 years ago. They don't hold a physical caliphate, but their ideology resonates with tens of thousands of people around the world, and it clearly resonated with a U.S. citizen. And there was no gateway for him to have to pass through to join the group. He just carried out an attack where he stood. Separately, with what we saw transpire in Las Vegas, leads me to believe that might have been, and investigation will tell us, an act of political violence, a symbolic act. As you were just talking about, the master sergeant would have had the technical know-how to create a device that was more powerful if he intended to. My initial, instincts are he rented a Tesla truck, he parked in front of the Trump Hotel, and he had a limited scale device, and it was all very purposeful.
I do want to ask you in this New Orleans attack, because I think this is going to be maybe hard for people to wrap their heads around. Can someone get inspired and radicalized by ISIS just with what's online and not essentially being trained somewhere overseas? Is that possible? And is that possibly what happened here?
It's absolutely possible, and it's actually, unfortunately, very common. Many of the travelers who joined ISIS were initially inspired online. They had a very sophisticated PR campaign, which really prompted them, promoted them as this global caliphate. That inspired people to travel to Syria and Iraq. But once they lost their physical caliphate, they've continued with that messaging. And people for different reasons. Different people join for different reasons or mobilize towards violence for different reasons. But this individual had some susceptibility to it, and the internet has changed the game. Traditionally, you had to be recruited into an organization, prove yourself over time. Now, in this case, you can somewhat self-select into the movement, which it sounds like he's done.
Chris, before you go, I was speaking to a city councilman here in New Orleans, asking them about sort of the precautions that weren't in place on New Year's Eve here, how that terrorist was able to jump in that pickup truck, get up on the curb, and drive very fast through Bourbon Street. He pointed to basically the country in general, saying, how is this guy able to operate and get radicalized? Do you think that law enforcement missed any red flags when it came to this, or are there in cases where it's just too hard to find them?
With the homegrown violent extremists, it's really, unfortunately, in some cases, very hard to find them, which is why you need that layered defense at these high-profile events or mass gatherings. I feel terrible for the police in New Orleans. They are certainly being very self-critical. That was a fatal mistake. You need to plan for the worst-case scenario, and in this case, they didn't. This individual found the weak point in their layered defense. But this was a committed jihadist, and they're going to do that and die trying. He demonstrated all of that. The threat from these organizations is persistent, and it will continue. And we have to be as committed as they are to protect our citizens, for the long haul.
Chris O'Leary, former FBI special agent, we appreciate you being on Top Story tonight. We are live from New Orleans as our special coverage continues. The cars involved in both these attacks were both rented from Turo. What we're learning about the rental car app tonight. And we're taking a live look at Bourbon Street, one of the most iconic roads for parties and celebrations in the U.S. forever changed. It has reopened tonight. The crowds are starting to gather back, not as full as it usually is. But again, less than 2 days ago, there were terror on these streets. You're watching Top Story. Stay with us. We're back now with our special coverage here in New Orleans tonight. Questions are swirling around the rental car app Turo, essentially an Airbnb for cars, which was used by the attacker here in New Orleans and by the suspect in the Las Vegas explosion, Cybertruck explosion. Turo says it's actively partnering with law enforcement authorities in both investigations. NBC's Antonia Hilton reports.
Tonight, car rental app Turo under new scrutiny.
Oh my God.
After authorities say it was used in connection with the deadly terror attack in New Orleans and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas. The peer-to-peer rental app is similar to Airbnb, allowing users to rent a vehicle directly from an owner rather than a car rental company.
You could get the keys to vacation success.
Users can meet car owners in person to pick up the ride or organize a remote handoff in which renters unlock the car using a lockbox code or the app.
Why do you think someone would seek out an app like Turo over more traditional companies like, say, a Hertz?
I think it makes it a little bit more anonymous. So when you go to a place like Hertz or Avis or Budget, one, you're probably in an airport. There are going to be a ton of cameras around. Everybody is going to see you. They have access to data streams that maybe an app like Turo does not.
Turo confirming its platform was used to rent the Ford pickup truck that plowed through New Orleans' Bourbon Street early Wednesday morning, and the Tesla Cybertruck that was filled with explosives outside Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. Authorities say right now there is no definitive link between the two incidents.
There is going to be a lot of scrutiny on whether or not they are doing best practices relative to their industry peers. Are they doing enough background checks? Are they providing enough safeguards? Because a question will be, what is their responsibility and how far did they deviate from that?
In a statement, a Turo spokesperson saying in part, "We do not believe that either renter involved in the Las Vegas and New Orleans attacks had a criminal background that would have identified them as a security threat. We remain committed to maintaining the highest standards in risk management." Turo has approximately 150,000 active hosts worldwide, with 350,000 active vehicle listings and 3.5 million active guests. Turo's website says Turo screens users when they create an account and again when they book a car. After that, screenings can be triggered for several reasons and may prompt Turo to deny users access to a car or app. However, Turo says it cannot reveal information about its screening process, other than that it involves a renter uploading their driver's license.
Certainly, you can trace these things down. But again, with the adapting technology, we're foolish to think that the criminals and terrorists are not going to adapt. In fact, they may actually out-innovate law enforcement, which is what really makes it difficult.
Tom, rental cars being used in ramming attacks is not unheard of. According to one analysis from San Jose State University, 5% of 184 vehicle ramming incidents from 1970 to 2018 used rented cars. But these two recent incidents with Turo raising concerns that more could follow, Tom.
All right, Antonia Hilton for us tonight. Antonia, we thank you for that. And we are following several other major headlines in Top Stories newsfeed. We want to begin with a fiery plane crash in California. One person is dead and more than a dozen injured after a small plane crashed into a warehouse roof in Fullerton, California. More than 100 people were evacuated from the building. It's not yet clear how many people were in the plane or the cause of that crash. As we continue our newsfeed, police in New York City hunting for multiple suspects who opened fire outside of a nightclub, injuring at least 10 people. Police say 3 to 4 men approached the Amazura nightclub in Queens late last night, firing at least 30 shots into a crowd of people gathered outside. Police say there was a private event going on inside the club, and there is no terror link. The victims are all expected to survive. We head now to Hawaii. Authorities investigating the cause of a deadly fireworks explosion that killed 4 people and left more than 20 others injured. The dramatic explosions captured on video in a Honolulu suburb on New Year's Eve. Officials say someone likely lit an aerial cake, a type of firework that contains multiple large aerial fireworks that fell over. Look at this, firing into a crate that set off other fireworks. Okay, we're going to have much more of our live coverage from New Orleans just ahead. We're going to speak with a man who was thrown from his wheelchair when that truck barreled down Bourbon Street, those terrifying moments as he nearly lost his life. And we are taking a live look at Bourbon Street tonight. It has reopened, the FBI giving back the street after they have cleared it, back to the city of New Orleans, which has reopened it with some security precautions. This is a live camera that you're looking at right here along the streets of Bourbon as we are live on Top Story. Stay with us. Welcome back to this special edition of Top Story, reporting from New Orleans. The FBI has now given Bourbon Street back to the city of New Orleans, which has decided to reopen it. And it does look a little different. Here you can see this hydraulic ramp that has now been activated so vehicles can't enter Bourbon Street. There's also these barriers on the sidewalk. Remember, that terrorist jumped the curb and ended up coming onto Bourbon Street. If this was in place, this attack likely would not have happened the way it did. And now there's this makeshift memorial remembering those 14 lives lost on Bourbon Street. With those 14 lost, some did survive this. Dozens were injured. We had the chance to speak to Jeremy Sensky from his hospital bed. He talked about how he was in a wheelchair when that terrorist came down Bourbon Street. He doesn't even remember being hit, but he was launched out of his wheelchair. And here's what he told us.
First of all, how you feeling?
Okay, I'm alive, man.
Yeah.
I'm lucky.
Can you even believe what happened?
I mean, it's the weirdest thing because, like, walking through, seeing all those people, I mean, it through my mind, I thought that it could happen. It's really weird, but just because there's so many people in one place, man, it went through my mind that it could happen.
How, do you remember anything?
So, I was on my way back. We were staying at the Wyndham LaBelle on Magazine Street. And I was coming down Bourbon towards Canal. And I was close to the end because I was supposed to call my friends and tell them I was going home. Because I'd left my friends. They went to a bar. I was on my way home and back to the hotel. And I heard just a massive noise. And I was facing the other way because I don't know why. I don't know what made me turn around. I heard a massive noise and I thought that something fell. And I turned around, and when I turned around, that's pretty much all that I remembered until I was on the ground. And I came back, and there was this people screaming, and I was laying on the ground, and I saw all my wheelchair parts on the ground beside me, and I started scraping, looking for my phone. I was looking for my phone to try to call for help. I couldn't find my phone, so I started screaming, and no one would come. So I pushed myself on my back, and I saw people, and they were taking pictures from the balcony, and I was screaming at them, help, and people were just looking at me. Cops were looking at me, and I know at this time that they were looking at me because I was still alive, and they weren't worried. They knew I was still alive. So I'm screaming, and finally somebody came over to me and just looked at me and said, "Listen, we know you're hurt, but you're alive." That's what they said to me, "You're alive." And I was just like, "Well, someone got to help me. Please get me out of here." And I just waited there, and I mean, whenever I first hit the ground, I heard gunfire, and I remember just in my mind, I was just thinking, I'm hoping I'm low enough on the ground. I thought that's why I was on the ground. I was hiding from the gunfire. And
could you hear the gunfire?
Oh yeah, the gun. I was from you to me away from the truck. The truck was right in front of me, but everything happened so fast. I didn't know what to even think about the gunfire. I didn't know what was going on, why it was happening.
Did you get knocked over by the car or by the people?
I'm assuming I got hit by the truck. But honestly, no one's ever told me that, so I don't know. But my wheelchair was completely bashed, and the pieces were all over the place. So something hit me.
Did you fall on your face? Do you remember?
I was on my face. I hit my teeth off the ground, and I heard the gunfire. And I heard more gunfire. You could tell it's on the gunfire from two different roads.
Did you hear the terrorists scream anything before the gunfire? Do you remember anything like that?
I don't think anyone was. I didn't hear any voice. I just heard screaming, and I heard gunfire, and then I just rolled myself over. After looking for my phone, I couldn't find my phone. It was all the people beside me, and I was screaming for help, and nobody would come. And I would thought it was somebody came. Finally, a cop. His name was Patrick. He came over, and he told me that there was a lot of people that didn't make it, and they were dead. And I was lucky to be alive. And I kept asking for someone to help me and get me out of there. And it took a while. I realized that it was a bad scene. And finally, they came over with some kind of like a strap of some kind, and they rolled me on it, and they didn't realize I couldn't walk. I've been paralyzed from my chest down since 1999. I don't think that they understood that, and I think that they thought that maybe I could have got away. I mean, it was just so much going on, and they put me on this thing, and they carried me through a lot of stuff to the ambulance. I can't believe that someone would do this, man. I mean, I heard that it was a person from the military, and they were a United States citizen. I mean, I'm not against anybody like that. I love everybody. I love everybody, and I just can't believe that would happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jeremy, thank you for talking to me. I'm sorry you went through this. I really apologize. You had to live through this. I'm sorry.
Jeremy Sensky, who somehow survived that terrible attack, and still, you can hear it in his voice, in shock that he's alive and what he witnessed. We're going to have much more coming up on Top Story, how you can help the people of New Orleans and the victims of this senseless tragedy. Stay with us. Finally tonight, the community here in New Orleans has just begun to recover from the attack that claimed the lives of 14 people and injured dozens of others. I want to bring in Andy Copland now. He's the president of the Greater New Orleans Foundation, organizing a special fund to support those who have been directly affected by the attack. Andy, talk to us about the fund and how much you've been able to raise and who it's going to help.
Sure. So we have a Victims Assistance Fund. We're calling it the New Orleans New Year's Day Tragedy Fund, and we're really trying to raise money to help those families whose loved ones were taken from us in this attack and those who were severely injured. So this is direct assistance. 100% of the money goes to the victims or, again, the families to those who were deceased.
Where can people help out? Where can they donate?
Yeah, so at the Greater New Orleans Foundation, our website, gnof.org. There's a donate button there directly for assistance to this fund. We've had thousands of people donating already, tens of thousands of dollars. We're well into the six figures. And again, looking for folks who love New Orleans, who care about saying, that we stand with the folks who were injured and affected to make sure that their lives can be, assisted And so folks who are feeling a commitment to New Orleans and to the folks who were injured or killed, this is the fund that the mayor has established and asked us to raise money for the victims and their families.
And again, the money's going to go directly to those victims that were both deceased and injured, or these are just the people who died?
Both the families of those we lost and for those who are severely injured, who are facing, long months of recovery.
Okay. Andy, we thank you so much for the work you're doing here in New Orleans, part of the fabric that makes this great city so special, and that community coming together, and hopefully Americans watching this broadcast all over the country maybe donate a little bit to help the people out, because so many people were affected.
Thank you so much, and thanks to your viewers.
Andy, we thank you. And we thank you for watching this special edition of Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas reporting from New Orleans. Our coverage here in the Big Easy is going to continue throughout the night. There have been a lot of developments in both this case and the case in Las Vegas as well. Bourbon Street, just behind me, has reopened. The crowds are starting to fill up. New Orleans says it's back, and it's safe. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.